welcome. I'm Rocio with Rocio at Law, and we are here today for an episode of the podcast Amplify. Before we get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means, what is Amplify, and then I will introduce our guest. So Amplify is partly a personal goal. It is getting to know yourself, being acquainted with your own opinions and ideas. That might take place in written word and spoken word and communicating with like-minded people. And then also it's a community goal, right? Because some people have a bigger platform, their voice has bigger reach, they might be an influencer, they might have organizations they can speak to, and they owe it to other voices to amplify them. So some people have a voice that's maybe, not the mainstream, or maybe not an experience where they feel like a lot of people understand where they're coming from. And so those people with the platform really do owe it to the rest of us to make sure that voices are amplified that are maybe not the mainstream. So this idea was born in 2024, and a lot has happened in 2025 that I think frankly makes the idea way more pressing, way more pertinent. There's obviously forces trying to shut down or cut off from the mainstream certain voices. That might be the LGBTQ community. It might be, these DEI initiatives to shut down the diversity. It might be the border security issues and certain people being deported. But I think now more than ever, it's important to make sure that all voices are heard, that we amplify the voices that are marginalized, ostracized, oppressed. And so we have Dr. Esther Aguilar Tejada here today, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the importance of kind of owning different parts of yourself and your own voice. So, Dr. Aguilar Tejada, if you could tell us a little bit about your personal history.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Rocio, so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this really important topic, like you said, especially now in 2025. And I also appreciate you asking me about my background story. I feel like us as humans, we don't often, one, get asked that, and two, get to really talk about us, our identities, and our experiences. So thank you so much for asking me. And I am an hija de inmigrantes. I'm a daughter of immigrants, right? So I was born here in Texas, but both of my parents were actually born in a small country in Central America called El Salvador, which I know you know.
Where I was born.
Where she was born too. And so I grew up with a lot of Salvadorian culture right at home, music, food, and also my parents took me every single year since I was little to El Salvador as well. And so I grew up with a lot of Salvadorian culture. However, I also grew up with a lot of American culture as well because I went to school in predominantly white areas, right? So I was exposed to a different culture, and I feel like that made me kind of look at things in how I categorize in two different ways. One, it made me feel like a little bit more curious and open to like the different experiences and stories that my friends and peers had than me. And then it kind of also made me realize that I was slightly a little bit different than others. And so that made me kind of look at the world with both a soft lens, but also a harsh one as well.
Okay, well, very cool. So obviously I had multiple reasons to invite you to the show. And one of them is just what I know about you, since knowing you from day one, seeing you grow up. Obviously we're from the same cultura. Your parents are my godparents.
Yes.
We're all kind of interrelated. We're all primos, even though we're not, right? And obviously our cultural experience is very different. Yeah. Our culture is very different. And the way that we're taught to adapt to American society is very different. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is such a great statement and great question. And I will say, like I said, growing up as a Salvadoreña in the United States was like interesting to say the least. I did experience some racism here in the United States. And also, like I said, my parents brought me back several years to El Salvador. So I experienced this thing of, you don't belong here in America because you're too Latina. And when I went to El Salvador, it was, you're too American, you're too white, right? So I had like a bit of an identity crisis at a young age as a teenager. And that kind of made me, here in the United States, like you said, adapting kind of needed like shrink in and feel like I needed to make myself smaller for survival reasons in a way. And so that kind of, like I said earlier, is what maybe slightly shaped my harsh view of the world a bit. I remember, I don't know if you've ever had this experience with your parents, but I remember looking at my dad and being like, why did we come here? Why did we come here? They don't want us here. Like, they don't they don't respect us sometimes, and it feels like I would rather be in El Salvador at the beach, vibing where it feels good, where it feels good sometimes too. And he said, Esther, like, I don't really like to see it that way because America has given us, our family, and you so many opportunities that you probably wouldn't have had in El Salvador. And so I remember that so much. And part of that really shaped my view of what I do in my career, how I am as a person, how I view the world, and everything like that.
Yeah, and I've definitely grown up with that conflict too of like, you're not quite American enough to be here, you're not quite Latino enough to be home. I remember when we got here, my family was older, right? So I was born here, or I was born in El Salvador, my sisters were, my mom didn't even speak English when we came here. And it was very like, we're only going to watch TV in English. Please only talk to your mother in English. Like, we have to adopt the culture and the language. And, in some ways it was good, right? Because it's like, you need the language to get educated, to get ahead, to get your career. But at the same time, you can imagine the impact of banning Spanish from your household.
Yes.
We weren't supposed to speak it. And the goal was to learn English. But after years and years, you start to lose it. You start to take it for granted. You start being embarrassed to speak it, And so it's hard to be kind of torn between the two cultures and trying to embrace both when there's pressure in one to be the other and pressure in the other to be the one.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're now very proud Latinas.
Yes, loud and proud. That is something I always say. Now I'll scream at the top of my lungs. I am a Salvadoran American, and I am happy to be when I'm happy to share my culture. And I love sharing it with you, right? Because you were such a big part of that growing up too, both culturally and educationally, because we have a picture of me in her college dorm one time, and my parents were like, you said I want to be like Rocio when I grow up. So you're a lawyer, and I'm going to be hopefully a clinical psychologist. Very different careers, however, same inspiration. And so I just wanted to say that. We'll share.
I love to hear that.
Yeah.
I think, role models are so important. Obviously, I have big sisters. A lot of what they did, I took after them. Both my sisters have a master's degree, high achieving, and definitely watching them. And, we both try to be vocal about our identity, even just putting on our business pages that, hey, we do speak Spanish. We are bilingual. We, I mentioned my country of origin in my biography on my profile, just really owning that and being like, this is a part of who I am. I'm not going to quiet it. This is part of what we need to lean into. All right. So I do want to hear about your current career and what you're up to. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you said, I am a bilingual Latina, more specifically a Salvadorian therapist. I actually work right now at a private practice at Empowered Healing Dallas, and we see clients with a bunch of different presenting concerns, both virtually and in person, and we can also see clients in many different states. And my focus is primarily on complex trauma, body neutrality, body image, and I also do couples and partnered therapy, and I have done groups before, and I'm wanting to potentially, start a body neutrality group now. So that's kind of the focus of my work at the private practice that I work in now.
Awesome. So if you could tell a little bit about the post, right? Because there was a post that I responded to and I was like, that's the tipping point for me. You got to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting you say that because what I posted, I was kind of anxious to post because I was really sharing truly what I thought, my opinions based on my professional experience, but also my personal experience. And something about I think I wanted to talk a little bit about Amplify. I was kind of afraid to speak out on this opinion, and something that might happen when you are afraid to amplify your own voice might be misconnection, right? So if I had never posted that, I don't think you would have ever, you probably would have reached out, but I don't know that we would have ever been sitting here doing this had I not posted that. And so I think I was posting something more specifically about actually sex and intimacy, and also just kind of experiencing all the things that I've experienced both as a therapist and a human in my role was so interesting. So that's kind of what got me to post that. And I'm so glad you reached out. And I was speaking about topics that I felt were quote unquote taboo. However, they're all just normal things that we all experience. We all have a lot of shared experiences as humans. We just don't often talk about it because there could be shame and guilt.
Absolutely. And I think, there's cultural, there's obviously we come from religious families,
Yes.
there's certain things that we don't talk about. We just act like they don't exist. It's not even like
Literally.
A topic that you're allowed to. You shouldn't even be thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reality is, like, there's things in there that need to be discussed, especially trauma. Those kind of things that can affect future relationships. So I thought that was huge. That really spoke to me, and I remember, early in my teen years, I was different. My sisters were in drill team and sororities, and they were very popular. And I'm like, I'm kind of the weird one. I dress strange. I have weird friends with piercings all over their face, whatever. And I started to struggle with depression.
Yeah.
And part of it was just like, I'm not what people expect me to be or want me to be. And I heard people, adults, they would be like, well, just think happier things, or just focus on something else, or just, kind of brush off these ideas and these feelings. And I'm like, they're the thoughts of a 13-year-old or the, feelings of a 13-year-old, but they're very real.
Yes.
And have very real implications.
Absolutely.
And it was my insistence for a few years, when I would be in my pediatrician's office, I would bring it up, to another adult and be like, I'm struggling. Can you help me? So I did eventually get, some treatment, got some help, but I'm like, a lot of the like Latino adults in my life are just like, you're going to be okay. You don't have anything to worry about. You have a good life. And it's like, you're torn, right? Because I'm like, Elise is my older sister. She talks about hiding under the dining table, hiding under mattresses while bombs are going on outside during a civil war. And I'm like, I get it. Like, that's not my problems. Like, my problems are very, very different from the ones that, the people of El Salvador, a lot of the hardships that people have been through. But I'm like, they're very real. They have, implications on my ability to succeed in school, my ability to establish relationships, all these different things. So it's like, it's just a series. It still needs to be addressed, even though it's of a very, very different nature, right, of problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did bring some reading for us. Can you tell us a little bit about these books?
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I appreciate you sharing a little bit of your story with me, Rocio. And I wanted to touch a bit on, I guess this is one of the books that I brought, is all the different parts that we have regardless of what we experience, right? We experience any type of difficulty and hardship, and we might, have different parts of us that come out of that, our anxious part, our sad parts, our angry parts as well. And so there's this therapy called internal family systems therapy. It's by Richard Schwartz. Actually wrote this really good book called No Bad Parts. And the idea is that all the parts of you, it's actually really cute. Look at this, the colors. Wait, where do I show this? I don't even know. The colors are really, really nice, and it is by Richard Schwartz. And the idea is that all of your parts are allowed to exist. Kind of like what you were saying earlier. My parts are so real, and they might be different than your parts. However, they're allowed to exist, and there's no such thing as a quote unquote bad part. And so this is one of my favorite therapy modalities to kind of not just even give therapy, but also live my life in that realm of all of my parts, even the more difficult ones, right? Because there's no bad parts, there might be more difficult parts, are allowed to exist in this world. The ones that are sad, the ones that are scared, the ones that are anxious are all allowed to exist. And so this is one of the books that I brought, and it's a vibe. 10 out of 10 recommend.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I do want to extend some grace to my family, right? To my parents and to kind of the adults in our upbringing. Especially now that I'm a mother.
Two precious girls.
I have two daughters, and my older one is a copy paste of me.
No, she is.
She is. And in so many ways that are like not even just, they're known to me. But she's kind of in that preteen, people are starting to get clicked, and they're starting to gossip, and they're starting to judge on appearance, and all these things are starting to happen. And we went shopping to the mall, and she's like, I want to go to Hot Topic. And I'm just like, so many conflicting thoughts, right? Because I'm like, I shopped at Hot Topic, I'm like, I remember having purple streaks in my hair, whatever. And I'm like, I just see a mini me, But I'm like, I am conflicted because my parents were strict about what I wore and how I presented, and, definitely not piercings and things like that. And I'm like looking at my daughter and I'm just like, what is the prevailing interest that I need to serve for her as her mother? Because I'm like, part of me is like, no, you have to look a certain way so that you can be popular, so you can be liked, so you can be successful, so you can be, called on more by your teachers or given more opportunities. And then I'm like, but what would it take to get there? And I remember what it was like, essentially being told you need to change things about yourself, or you need to conform, or you need to do things a certain way. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe she doesn't have as many boyfriends, or maybe she's not, whatever, this popularity. But if she gets to just be her authentic self. And I'm like, you want to self-express wearing this? You want to self-express listening to that? Whatever. Like, go be you, be authentic, embrace who you are. And it is a torn perspective because, again, we want, what can we do for our children to give them the best shot at everything in life? But then it's like also what's best for her mental health, what's best for her in the long term, to not traumatize her, to not pass on generational curses, and to be like, you're amazing the way you are, kid.
Exactly. All of you is welcome here. That's one of my favorite phrases.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, all of you is welcome here. My the lady that runs one of the ladies that runs the practice that I work at. I don't know why it was so hard to say that sentence unwell. She taught me that phrase, and this whole practice works from a culturally informed, trauma-informed lens. And I really appreciate what you said about extending grace to our parents, because I actually did my dissertation on Salvadorian interventions in the school, so I learned a lot about the Civil War. And through the reading and through hearing my parents speak, they were in survival, fighting for their lives, and also fighting for their lives after the war, right? And so in a way, their protectiveness of us was like a little bit more extreme here. It didn't fit for the stuff we were experiencing here, but it fit for the stuff they were experiencing in El Salvador. So I love that you extend that grace to them, because I'm learning to extend that grace to them as well, even though as a teen, I was like, you're ruining my life. And something you said that is so important in terms of like being a certain way, right? Or performing a certain way or looking a certain way, I kind of struggled with too in terms of professionalism in the career that I'm at. Professionalism kind of to me was defined of fitting in a certain box of needing to look a certain way, dress a certain way, and even talk a certain way. But however, this as a bilingual person, some of my words get jumbled. I might not even be able to say something eloquently. Like something that I'm actually very proud of myself for working on in this year of 2025 is, instead of pretending I know what a fancy word is, I'll look it up. I'll look it up on Google, or I'll actually like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about what that means, or what does that word mean? Because I actually don't know a lot of the fancy English words, because I actually learned Spanish and English growing up at the same time. And so I used to have a lot of shame and guilt around not knowing what certain words meant. And I would stay quiet, right? I would like be inside because I thought I couldn't say anything because the need to survive, right? And so now I no longer do that, right? Because I found my voice, I grew up, and I accepted the parts of me again that I struggled to accept with. And just to say that it took a lot of time for me to be able to do that, both in therapy, experiencing life, and even like in the schools. And something you said was so important too. You said that you were experiencing just having difficulties at school, right? I did get my PsyD actually in school psychology. And one of the things I learned in school psychology that was the best, it was like, hey, you have a kid and they're not paying attention, or they're acting out in class. Before you're quick to label them as defiant or something like that, take into consideration their home life, their trauma, their mental health, even their physical and emotional health. And so you brought that up, and I was like, yeah, it's so important to think about that in terms of thinking about the child as a whole, and thinking about any human I work with as a whole, and even any person I interact with as a whole. Like when I interact with somebody and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't agree with you, or it might feel kind of strange, I'm like, let me think about more what's, not guessing everything about your life, but just like asking more, curious, explorative questions. So I really like that you shared all that stuff, and it does align with the stuff that I learned both in school and as a human.
Yeah, and I think, even as an adult, there's things we have going on in our personal life that I'm like, okay, that whole thing went down with my kids this morning or whatever. And I'm like, I need to mentally prepare myself for my day. I'm going to take a breather, or maybe pray or whatever, to like get my mindset right for work.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I am 42 years old trying to cope. Right. And I'm like, kids how do they know how to cope? How do they know how to process things, you know, especially if they don't have someone guiding them or being the example. I did a lot of tutoring growing up. That was like my side gig during college and part of law school. And one of the boys I tutored him for 3 years. And I'm going to brag a little bit. When we started, he was like failing. He looked a mess. I mean, he literally, I watched him eat a cookie and wipe his hands on his shirt, you know? And I was like, we're going to get you right, you know? And by the end, like the final conversation, it was me and him and his parents. He's like, I want to sign up for honors courses. He's like, I'm more than capable. I'm now making all A's in my regular classes, you know? So he was a great kid. But the point of this story is, you know, when I was there, he knows it's tutoring time. It's down to business. We're going to do the homework. We're going to do the things. We had a very structured, you know, this is when we have snack. This is when we do the work, whatever. And one day I get there and like the first tough problem that we get to, he's like, I just don't know. I don't know. He's like, I'm really tired today, you know, And I'm like, well, let's work through it together, you know. He's like, okay. We get to the next hard problem and he's just like, can we not have a day off? You know, like he was really frustrated.
That's so real.
And I was like, put that away. It's like, is something going on? You know, what happened? Is, you know, at school or anything? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I ride the bus home every day. And there were kids picking on me and I didn't know what to do. And it was me and a whole bunch of them. And I was just like, you have this whole problem that you don't know what to do. You want guidance. And you need to deal with that. You need to, let's talk about that. And then we'll figure out math 2 times 27 or whatever. You know, like it wasn't a priority because he's just like, I've got this burden thing going on in my brain. And so, you know, trying to show that kind of grace to everybody, obviously, to other adults, especially to my daughters, their friends, their peers, like, you don't know what people are going through. Everybody's kind of going through a lot right now. And just, I think, really checking in with people in a sincere way, not just like, okay, you know, we're here, you ready? Let's do the thing, you know, but like, okay, you know, you seem off with what's going on. I think will open the door a lot to people, you know, self-expression, being real, and then we could be productive, you know, after the conversation about the thing and like, let's have a plan and, you know, this is who to talk to about it. And then it was like, we can get down to business. We can be more productive, you know?
Absolutely, right? Because that kid felt the safe and non-judgmental aura and vibes that you were giving him and was able to, like we said, you know, censorship or not being able to amplify, he was able to actually amplify his voice and tell you his story. And I think that one of the things of not being able to amplify your own voice, opinion, identity, one of the things that could come from that is like suppression of that could be, you know, irritability. Oh my goodness, where was I going with this? Irritability, lack of connection, powerlessness and helplessness. And a lot of people don't know that that's going on behind closed doors. And so, yeah, again, fostering a safe, non-judgmental space and amplifying your voice when it feels safe and good to is important to be able to do so. And that's why I really appreciate you having me on here to amplify my voice and my experience. And I appreciate you sharing yours too, because I'm learning a lot about some of the stuff you did too through your educational journey in your life as well, that we don't have to sit down and talk about this kind of stuff. So it's great.
Yeah. And I think almost every service job where you're going to interact with people, right? You are going to provide a better service if you see people as people, you know? I'm going to be a little bit critical of other plaintiff attorneys for a minute.
You do you.
So I was a defense attorney for 6 years first. And so I was up against every plaintiff attorney in town. And I'm like, the quality of the work, the quality of the representation varies widely. And if you know, have a questionnaire for your client to fill out and you just send it and you're like, send it back when you're complete, you're going to get them trying to finish the form. That's the quality of answer you're going to get. But if you're there and you're engaging with them and you're like, we have 12 questions to go over, but if we get to 8 and you got something to add, let's get into it, you know, and you get to question 8 and they get to tell you the part of their story that's really important to them, you know, like for some people, they're like, I might lose my job because of the car wreck. You know, I don't have a vehicle available. I don't have transportation right now. Or I can't take days off because, you know, I need to go get this medical treatment. So they're focused on the job. Some people are, you know, it's more of the financial component. They're just like, how am I going to pay for all of this? You know, I'm out of pocket. I need to, you know, whatever. Some people, it's just the fear of, am I going to get better? Especially if they had any kind of like pre-existing issue, because some people come to us and they already have health issues, and this really just kind of pushes them over the edge. But yeah, when you sit there and you engage and you're like, this is a human that I'm talking to, this is not like a robot checklist. I feel like what you're able to get out of people is completely different.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you were like, I'm going to be a little bit critical. And I was like, you do you. I don't even think it's criticism. It's more of noticing the deeper systems that are in place that can be harmful at the end of the day. And also giving some slight feedback, like some feedback. This is what I'm noticing. I know we were talking about a place I worked at where I had 60 clients. And now I'm so grateful now that I only need to have like about 40 on my caseload. And that makes me able to look at things more closely, not be in my own survival mode of, oh my goodness, I need to meet this quota that they're wanting me to meet, right? And so I think the systems in play can be really damaging. Like working in the schools, I saw how the systems are damaging in Chicago public schools, right? And so that actually allowed me to have my therapeutic lens of the multicultural and culturally competent lens of whoever is sitting in front of me might not be presenting the same as, let's see, the majority of people in this world, right? Especially if they're having an identity of being queer, you know, a person of color, or a female, or transgender, or anything like that. And so I think it's okay to kind of challenge some of those deeper systems that are in place that are very obviously harmful. And that's part of the work that is embedded deeper in my work. And I know it's definitely embedded deeper in your work as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard because like, I represent individuals, right? Every time someone signs up with us, they're a person who has been in a car wreck, a work injury, whatever has happened to them. And we're up against a multi-billion, if not multi-trillion-dollar business. Who cares about a bottom line? I'm like, our interests are entirely different. I've been on the other side. How do they evaluate cases? They're like looking at medical billing codes, you know, CPT this, ICD that, and they're like, okay, if this injury, the case has value X. And I'm like, how can you possibly account for the difference of this person's experience and this person's experience, plugging in a couple of numbers, you know, and just spitting out a formula? I'm like, that's not the reality. You know, someone who comes in and, you know, they were already mentally fragile, you know, or at risk or whatever, they might get a PTSD from a really bad car wreck, you know, whereas another person, you know, sometimes we see crazy cases like 18-wheeler cases and people walk away and they're like, my body's hurt, I need this treatment, you know, broken leg, something we can put together very visually, very objectively, right? And they're like emotionally mostly okay. They're like, I walked out unscathed, I'm good, you know? And I'm just like, you never know what one person's experience is going to be versus another. And you just can't be boiling people down to a formula, you know? So that's part of Amplify too. It's like, what is the importance? What is the struggle? What is the, you know, experience that each individual client has? And how do we amplify that to get value added on the case, to get it looked at in a different lens? So they're not just a number, you know, they're not just a case number 252, right? They're an actual person that's coming in there with a different story.
More than a case, more than a diagnosis, anything like that.
Exactly. Okay, so you have a couple of other things in here.
I do.
You mentioned censorship a couple of times, so I do want to hear about that a little bit.
Actually, when you told me about the word amplify, the word censorship came up to me. And of course I Googled amplify because I knew what it meant, but I wanted to know what the internet was saying and how mostly, especially a .org, a .edu website was kind of defining it as. And ironically, the first thing that came up when I Googled amplify was like the sound, like guitar, make music louder. And I was like, okay, but then deeper, it was raising your voice, your identity, your opinion. And so I just thought that was interesting that kind of the word amplify has so many different meanings to it. But the word censorship came because one day I was talking to my own personal therapist. I think that it is beneficial when therapists also have therapists. So I was talking to my own therapist, and I was telling her about some of my emotions and even some of my behaviors. And she was like, kind of sounds like you might feel like you have to censor yourself, or you might be censoring yourself in certain environments. And so I do think that like we I was like, yes, you are correct. You're not wrong, right? And that was impacting how I was feeling, and even what I was feeling in my body. Like, I was feeling tenser. I was feeling more tummy aches and things like that. And I was also maybe experiencing irritability. Like I said, that was one of the things of suppressing and not amplifying yourself is, helplessness, irritability, or anything like that. And so that's the word that made me think of and tied it to amplify when you asked me that.
That's so interesting. And I think of, even just little ways that I find myself hesitant, reluctant, or trying to, censor myself.
Yes.
One of the things that everyone who's close to me knows is I tend to wear clothes that makes a statement. Not even just the red. I actually making more of a statement with the wristband. So it is a Black History Month, watch band.
Yes.
That's kind of the conversation point, right?
Yes.
Certain people that see it, they know that's what it's about. They ask about my background, what does it mean to me? But I have a lot of pride gear. I have Black Lives Matter, read banned books. And I wear this stuff because I want people to know who are of those silenced groups, of those banned groups, of whatever, that like, I'm a safe person, I'm an ally, I'm here, I love you, I see you, but at the same time, the flip side of that coin is like, I'm going to go to take one of my daughters to a birthday party, right? And I'm like, there's people there who are other parents who probably don't align with me. And then I'm like more hesitant. I'm like, do I wear this, or do I wear just my, black Adidas shirt? Like, am I going to just blend and be chill and not be vocal about who I am? Because I'm like, really, this is about the kids and all this. But then I'm like, okay, what if there's a kid who's queer? What if there's a, child who's worried about being deported or whatever? Like, should I be, censoring myself in these spaces? So I think it's always kind of, to some level, we all struggle with it. Like, what do I censor? What do I not? What are the implications? Who am I really looking out for if I'm vocal about these things? And thankfully, my kids are not shy about who they are.
I love that.
They're, especially the younger one, she's very assertive about who she is. She has opinions on everything. And so I'm like, I don't feel like they would even respect if they knew that I was censoring myself. I think they would actually join the conversation with me, and they don't see eye to eye with me on everything.
Of course.
There's certain things that, certain parenting things, right? I'm like, oh, I don't know, that movie's too scary or too adult or whatever. And they're like, we're ready. But then just other things, I'm like, do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? Allie did. My older daughter wanted to go to the Frisco Pride Festival. And she is just, she's met a few people who identify different ways. And so she's curious about it. And she's like, I want to know more. She's like, I think I need to talk to different people. And she's just having an open mind about it. But as a parent, I'm like, does she need to go there? I don't know. What if they're, but I'm like, I allow my own self-expression. I need to encourage their self-expression, especially, the stuff that they're driving, right? I'm not telling them like, you're going to do this. We're gonna, like, they are driving the conversation. They're very informed. They're given opportunities. They're given books, When my older one turned 8, I was like, we're going to read a book that talks about your body and how it's going to change. That talks about consent and what does that mean? That talks about, and like, we kind of went through these things. And it's funny because now that she's older, she's just like, are you going to read that book with Eva, with the younger one? She's like, I think she's ready. I think it's time. And I'm just like, look at you. Like, the first time or two that I read it with her, she was just like kind of hiding from me, because it's uncomfortable. It's to address topics you normally haven't. But then by like the third, fourth day, she's like, can we read more of the book? So fostering
that curiosity in her.
And getting away from that censorship, getting away from the shame, getting away from the we don't talk about that, kind of coming full circle with a lot of the things that we were raised with.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. So tell us how people can get in touch with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So people can get in touch with me through our website, www.empoweredhealingdallas.com. And we're social media here. I think there's a lot of controversy about social media, but I think it makes things a lot more accessible. Our private practice has a social media page called Empowered Healing Dallas, and they post me a lot on there talking, and it links it right to our website, so you can go there and find me on there. My full name is Esther Aguilar Tejada, PsyD, and I'll be under there. And you can also, my email is draguilarT@empoweredhealingdallas.com. So
awesome. Well, we so appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I feel like when I asked you to be here, you thought about saying no.
I panicked a little bit.
But I'm glad you were very courageous and vulnerable and willing to be here and give this time and this information that hopefully people can walk away with, knowing about the book, knowing about, how to find you, and just kind of processing through some of the stuff that you've taught us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity and the safe, non-judgmental space to do so.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us for the podcast with Dr. Aguilar Tejada. And we would love to have you connect with Rocio at Law as well. I do go by my first name, which I shied away from when I was younger. I went with Rose, Rosie, things that were more palatable for Americans. But now I have leaned all the way into Rocio. Rocio at Law is the firm, it is the brand, and you can connect with us on social media, on the website. I am very involved in the community, so if you want support for your organization, education, different community services, please reach out. Let's see how we connect. And thank you for being with us.